All right. Welcome to the March 7th Fee Committee meeting. Just real quick note, the Fee Committee has 4 members, 2 counselors, Counselor Tabor and Counselor Denton. They are the voting members, and the city manager and the finance rep, which I am the finance rep. We have a heavy agenda, so if we could start with the acceptance of the meeting of May 25th, 2001.
Move we accept those minutes.
Second.
All right, perfect. And now to opening marks by the legal department.
First off, let me get this mask off. I'm here because Andrew asked me to be here. And the purpose was to just kind of have a general discussion of revenue-raising capabilities of the municipality with a particular focus on what the fee committee can do or not do in terms of its recommendations to the city council. So thinking about it, I've concluded this morning that there's about 4 different ways that municipalities or in New Hampshire can raise money. The first one, the obvious one, is taxes. Such as the real estate taxes, automobile-related taxes. The thing about taxes is they need to have very express state legislative authority to do it. If there isn't a statute saying that a municipality can implement a particular tax, then it can't. And a tax would be distinct, and generally speaking, those state legislative acts will also specify what that tax is. The real estate tax, for example, has to be based upon a proportionate value of real estate compared to other real estate in the city. I would compare taxes with the next item, which is municipalities can implement fees. Now, fees differ from taxes in that while taxes are actually a revenue-raising concept, fees are limited in that revenues can only be raised equal to the amount that it costs to operate the program for which the fee is being levied. So that, taking a generous view, the highest fee that you could have or you could recommend for any different program would be if you added up all of the city time and expenses that it takes to operate the program for which you're going to collect the fee, and you divide that by the number of people who are going to be subject to this fee, then the highest fee is going to be, to each one of those people, is going to be roughly the product of the mathematical calculation. Fees, therefore, are always less than taxes because you're not really allowed to make money from a fee. You just recover your cost. The third revenue-raising concept that can apply to a municipality in New Hampshire is you can enter contracts. Now, it was actually this one that caused me to be here today because Councilor Denton had suggested that there might be a fee associated with restaurants that did business on city property but did not comply with the composting ordinance. Right. So it was in thinking about what it was that he was really asking for and exchanging correspondence with him about it that I came to the belief that what he's asking to be considered here is not a fee, not really a cost that would recover, not an amount of money that would recover your cost of implementing any particular program. What he's really talking about is a contract. What he's saying is any restaurant that wants to use city property would have to pay us to do it. And the amount they would have to pay us, in addition to the amount that the city council has already established, would include an additional amount that's paid, and that amount is in the nature of an agreement. It's a contract between the city and the restaurants, which the city would basically say, we will let you use our sidewalk And here's what you have to pay. The amount that the city council's already said, plus a further amount if you don't follow our composting ordinance. And the thing about these contract form as a revenue-raising concept is that you do not require specific enabling legislation. The amount is not set by any state law or local law. It is basically the product of negotiation. If you said to the restaurants, if you don't comply with our composting ordinance, you're going to have to pay $10,000 for a violation. They don't have to pay the $10,000, but they don't get to use the sidewalk either. It's a negotiation. It's a contract. So in the case of that fee, the amount of money that will be charged to individuals that conducted business on city property but didn't comply with the composting ordinance, that is within your authority to make a recommendation, whatever amount you think serves the public good. And the people that would pay that amount have the option of just not paying at all or not using the city property. So that's like a contract, kind of a revenue-raising idea. Sometimes this gets used in enforcement matters, in cases where we have brought an action, let's say, against the developer for building without a permit. The city, will offer to settle that case. We'll withdraw our action against you if you pay some amount. Now, the developer in that case isn't obligated to pay anything unless they agree to, unless they make the contract with the city. And they often will, because it's to their business advantage to settle the case by paying an amount of money rather than litigating it through to the bitter end, for example. Now, the last or the fourth kind of way that a municipality in New Hampshire can raise money is through penalties. And penalties, as the name suggests, are punishments. In order to assess a penalty against somebody, a municipality in New Hampshire has to have, once again, enabling legislation. The state has to say you can assess penalties. And the principal way that gets done is that city councils have the authority to adopt ordinances with penalty provisions. And anyone who violates that penalty, violates the ordinance, is subject to the penalty provision. And the state has given the city, all cities and towns, the authority to establish a penalty of up to $1,000 per violation of the ordinance. In fact, that's what it's called, violation. That's the level of quasi-crime. And there were some the major limitation, however, is that in order to collect a penalty in the way that I've just described, there needs to be a conviction in court. So the city council could say penalty of $1,000, every time you build without a permit. But in fact, you'd have to convince a judge to actually assess that penalty after a conviction. So in terms of revenue raising for the municipality, this last method, the penalty, is pretty limited use and is subject to some serious obstacles. So those are really the ways that municipalities can raise money. This, of course, is the fee committee, which in general has had the responsibility over the years of determining fees. And of course, a fee, as we said, is the amount of money that it reasonably takes the city to recover for its cost of administering any particular program. Now, that function of the fee committee, I think, has kind of been expanded a little bit, kind of a creeping expansion. And Councilor Denton's question is a perfect example of that, because what you would be asked to opine on in response to his question is not really a fee. It's not really the amount of money necessary for the city to implement the program of having restaurants on sidewalks. It's really a contract question. How much would you want to charge restaurants that do that, but don't comply with the composting ordinance? And the fee committee is, I think, kind of an appropriate body to consider the question, even though the question doesn't actually involve a fee. So there's my pitch. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Actually, is there any questions for Bob, or we can go right into the composting, which is next on the agenda?
No questions, thank you.
The provision that fees are to cover costs, recover costs, is that state statute?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there's a lot of case law on it. Well, state statute and case law from the Supreme Court. But
Thank you.
that's what it is.
Does it have to be monetary cost?
No, wouldn't have to be.
Okay.
Any more questions? All right, right into the composting. So I don't know how you want to go with it. You want to
Yeah, I'll
go ahead and ask your questions, or?
I'll gladly give a quick one over the world for anyone who's not tracking this. So, the main push for me on composting over the past, I guess, 4 of the prior 6 years has been because food waste is the 3rd largest source of greenhouse gas emissions because it creates methane. So there have been numerous incentives pushed for the city to support either residents who compost, whether it be with a rebate for curbside composting, or for, in this case, restaurants who choose to compost. And composting is a lot more expensive than many might think. It could cost over $1,000 a month. Over 2+ years ago, when I proposed the single-use disposable ordinance for city property, there was a number of things that were required. One is that restaurants essentially compost. And the goal then, and it was limited outside dining, I think there's probably 6 restaurants, is that all of them would comply at some point. Since COVID happened, there's far more outdoor dining. Obviously, I'm a huge supporter of it. And ideally, in my mind, when COVID passes, outdoor dining will remain. And at that point, all the restaurants would be required to compost, and that would be done by them being either, I guess, through contract, not through a fee. But it would cost just as much for them not to compost as it would to compost. However, we're not there, and it was clear at the city council meeting from 2 weeks ago that the council is not looking to impose that much of a cost on restaurants operating downtown. With that in mind, I still would like to enter into some sort of contract with the restaurants who are not composting. I'm not sure if, Councilor Shaver, if you have any thoughts on an amount. What I had originally proposed and didn't go through it at the last meeting was simply whatever the amount that the council decided for all restaurants, half it for those that actually compost, and then charge a fee to those that don't, which would make them whole. I do think that would be too much money, and I would like to see something assessed, ideally on a monthly basis, in case they decide, hey, we are actually going to start composting in that instance. And I'll gladly take any thoughts or feedback or...
Some of our restaurants downtown do compost now, some don't. Thank you for researching what it does cost. I was surprised at how much it costs. I think philosophically, I'd like those that choose not to compost to have to pay a little extra in the negotiated contract. But I'm also sensitive to it's easier for a large restaurant actually to compost. At least those are the examples I know. And it's harder for the smaller restaurants. So I'm sensitive to the burden on them. But you know, if we're in the range of $200 or something like that, I think that's...
Would that be for the season or for the per month?
I would think of that for the season, but we can have dialogue about it.
What's easier for the city? Could it be done monthly, or would it be better just to do this season of outdoor dining, just one flat fee, one in the contract?
Well, as I understand it, the way View Permit is being stood up, there's an option for a payment plan of 2 payments.
Okay.
One halfway through the season, July, I'm going to turn and look at Bev, July? And then one at the outset.
So would $200 payments. That work for
So 200 or 200?
To 100.
two $100.
So we would just add a line on the fee schedule to, if you do not compost, it'll be $200 per season? Is that what you're envisioning?
Yes.
So how this works is you two will approve any fees that today, and when the budget book gets published, this will be an appendix to the back of the budget, and when the budget gets passed in June, this will go in front of the whole council, and they will vote on the whole fee.
There would be further
Schedule.
debate. Yeah.
Right, so that if they had any questions at that time, it would come up at that time. So if you both agree to that, we would add, and Bob, would that be, that's okay if we add a line on here?
Yeah, it would go exactly the way you just said, and in practice, as a practical matter, you would tell every restaurant that wanted to have food service on city sidewalks, or on city property, that, I guess you would ask them if they're gonna compost, and if they are, that's the end of it. But if they are not gonna compost, then you would tell them there will be an additional $200 fee collected in 2 payments, as you said.
And Andrew, I think we should express it as failure to abide by and our ordinance number that.
The other thing I would recommend is, if that's the way it happens, not everybody is always honest with the city, and so it might be a good idea to do little spot checks and see if, in fact, the restaurants that said they were composting are composting.
Rather, can I weigh in with an alternative?
Please.
And if you like it, I'll tell you who to give the credit to, and if you don't like it, it's my idea. How's that? Rather than penalize people who don't do something, do you reward people who do something by taking it off their bill? I don't know how
If that was an option, I'd prefer that.
that becomes an enforcement and a administrative thing.
I'm assuming since the city manager proposed it, you're comfortable with the
Figure it out.
implementation. But philosophically, I like it.
So essentially,
Would you do 1,700?
right, you do 1,700,
Right.
but then that in and of itself needs a council vote to amend, correct?
No, because it's on the fee schedule now.
And that's in the case of a parking spot, just to be clear.
When you've already enacted the fee for this season, and it is in the fee schedule now as current, so I don't know how, if this goes all the way till, it's not gonna be enacted till June, which makes it effective July 1, how do you do that then?
And you'd impact that July 1
It would be
second
the
payment.
second payment.
That assumes everybody takes advantage of 2 payments.
Mm. Could say at the, I don't know.
Setting aside the implementation, you know, I think Counselor Denton and I are in agreement about moving to rewarding, right?
Correct.
So, how do we change our last vote of the council, or do we need to?
You could do it tonight, you could do it easily, just by adding a $200 fee to every city, public realm use of by a restaurant, to be waived if the restaurant engages in composting. One motion, one vote, done. We just,
All right.
And would then,
Then
That gives
that
you
would
time
be,
to
that would
implement.
make the fee schedule in the budget book, and it would be there as that, and then go through the regular budget process.
thoughts, city manager? Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for that.
All right.
By the way, that was Peter Rice's idea.
Thank you, Peter.
All right, we'll go to
Karen
the,
suggested it to me later.
go to the fire department, which is on page 33 of your schedule.
Thanks, Bob. So we have Chief Germain and Deputy Chief Howe here.
Go ahead. Yep. Just go ahead and start talking about your fee change there.
So we just have one fee change, I believe. Certainly just one related to fire prevention, and that is, last year we instituted a hot work permit, which is when people do work that creates sparks or use open flames, such as welding, roof work, and that sort of thing. It's pretty common in other communities. So we instituted that last year, and like many things, we try and tweak it as things become apparent as to how they work well or don't work well. And it became apparent that we needed a longer permit, so we added a one-year permit for some of the larger projects in town. There's many large projects that take more than a year. And it just
a typo.
was a little bit
Yep.
cumbersome for them and for us to have them pull a new permit every month. So that really was the change, and we went from $100 for a week to $100 for a month. And then we added a year one for $500.
So, Pat, in that third line that is in gray, it should say per year instead of per week for 500?
Yes, I don't have that, but
Yeah, it's
yeah,
a
we were looking at it
typo.
early, so it is.
Okay.
It should be 500 for the year, 100 for a month, and 50 for a day.
We don't have 50 for a day, but I'm sorry, we do. That didn't change,
Those
so
did
it's not in
not
gray,
change,
right?
yep.
But you're deleting the hot work permit per week.
Right, we're changing that to a month for
Got it.
100, and then we're adding a year option.
So your choices, if you were going to get permitted, is a day, a month, or a year.
Yeah, so some jobs might be just a day.
Got it?
Any questions, counselors?
On that or on the fire altogether?
Just on that, yep.
I do not.
Do you approve, or can you take a vote to say?
I'll move that we approve those.
Second?
All right, and the counselor had additional questions, if you want to go ahead.
So regarding the hotel fee, it says it's $100 annually, and then per room is $2.50. Giving increasing costs across the city, I was wondering if that still reflects accurately the amount of effort gone in, or if that could be justified to be increased.
That's a good question. So the first year that we did that with the hotels was, it started in 2020. And because we had never inspected existing hotels before, it was quite cumbersome, because we're going into places that hadn't been inspected, and some of them have been open for decades, and so we found a lot of problems. So it was cumbersome not just for us, but also for the hotels, having to fix whatever it is that we find. So it's possible that we probably use more resources than what we raised in fees, but I think moving forward, that the numbers that we have are pretty good, because having just inspected them, we expect to find fewer problems. We fix the problems that have been there for years, and now it's just a matter of maintenance. So
I'm going to restate that back to you if I can. The current amount there reflects what you're expecting it to actually cost this time?
yes.
Okay.
I mean, what I essentially did was I looked at what other communities charged, and took that, but I think it's pretty close to what it would cost.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, good with the fire department. I was wondering if we could bring the police in real quick. The counselor had a real quick question.
Thank you, yeah.
Go ahead. Yep.
Thank you, Captain. There's been a lot more awareness recently across the country regarding how fees are negatively impacting some demographics more than others. I have no idea if the police department or the city or anyone tracks the kind of information, but just looking at the fees that are listed, do we have any statistics? Again, I just want to make sure there's no disproportionate effect on one group over another.
So the fees that you're speaking of primarily are alarm fees. So any private residence or business that has an alarm would be in that category. So you're basically looking at two different categories, whether it's a private homeowner or whether it's a business, whether it's a residential alarm or a business alarm. We have first 3 false alarms. These are for false alarms. So you would be allowed in a calendar year, or it's run by fiscal year, 3 free false alarms, meaning that the officers were dispatched to the alarm, and the alarm is deemed to be an accident or false or otherwise not a real problem. And then on the 4th, the fee is imposed, and then it subsequently goes up each time there's a false alarm after that. As far as a breakdown between, so you really have 2 categories there, whether it's a private residence or whether it's a business. So those are the 2 demographics that we speak of. I could find a breakdown as perhaps, and maybe Karen knows a little bit better, as far as where we customarily impose our fee more, given that we get a vast majority of our alarms to businesses and not residences.
Right.
I would suspect that our businesses are feed significantly more than private residences.
Well, I was going to say, excuse me, I looked at last fiscal years, and out of 1,016 calls, 25 of them were residents.
Oh, wow.
Of those 25, 8 were voided calls, meaning that the officer didn't arrive on scene. 14 were allowed, under that 3 allowed calls, and 3 were billed. So all the remaining ones were businesses. And a lot of those were, untrained staff tripping off the alarm, wildlife, et cetera. So.
Thank you. Yeah, my fear, and there was nothing to base it on, was, let's say, there were far more billings at Gosling Meadows than in the South End, but it sounds like that's not the case, so
No.
thank you.
Yep.
Any more questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you both.
All right, the next is Inspection Department. Shanti Wolf. Page 19.
So we are only proposing 1 fee increase this year, which would be for commercial roofing, which would be $100 for every permit for a commercial roofing job. And historically, Portsmouth has not charged for roofing at all. Has not actually required an permit application, which does go against the state building code because roofing is a job that does in fact require a permit by law. Somehow that was missed, so we'd like to add that back in. But the primary reason that we want to see not only an application but a fee, because we've had several situations where, by and large, your flat commercial roofs accommodate either gas-fired or electrical-powered rooftop units. We've come across several that the roofers have taken it upon themselves to disconnect and reconnect gas and electric. And we have gone after the fact as a propane leak, or there was a breaker stripped, and we went onto the roof and realized, in fact, that this was a brand new roof job that was done. We didn't know about it. And as a result, the unlicensed trays disconnected and reconnected gas or electric. So safety, and also the $100 really is right in line with the administrative costs associated with filing the permit, and then the inspector's time to go out there and do the job and enter in their inspection.
So we have to do this to comply with the law. This is really not a choice.
Correct, but the fee does not have to be assessed by law. There's no requirement that a fee is charged. So we're proposing the fee just to cover our costs associated.
I have a broader question, not pertinent to, and maybe either you, Andrew, or Karen could better answer this, but if we wanted to waive fees, are we allowed to do that for certain things?
I wouldn't waive any fee without council approval.
Okay.
I'm not even looking at the attorney. I don't know if the attorney's still here.
So the time to do that would be when we vote on the fees in as part of the budget. I want to bring forward waiving fees.
Like, what is your,
So-
what's your thought?
There's several things in here. So the overall picture is a number of these things apply if someone goes to install a solar array or an electric vehicle charger. Just in general, is if we waived some of those, they might add up to being $500 or more. So it's just incentivizing people to do that, to be rewarding good behavior. But if this isn't the place, then I'm fine.
I guess during the budget, you could ask to add it.
Can I put Shanti on the spot? Shanti, what do you see in other communities? What do you think is happening in this
So, I
regard?
mean, there's a few things that I see with that, right? One is it does kind of go against some of the goals and objectives that the council has laid out for us, which would be to maintain financial stability. So one way to maintain financial stability would be perhaps to increase fees and not to waive them altogether. So there would be, essentially, we'd be doing plan review, administrative work, and inspections. The city would be donating that, right? We'd be doing them for free.
Correct.
Because, and then it would be really difficult to project and balance the budget. I mean, I do have analytics that would tell me how many mini split heat pumps we did, how many solar arrays we did, and I could tell you, just how much revenue, permit revenue, we would be losing and how that would go against our proposed budget. I understand incentivizing, maybe there's other ways to incentivize, but to pull it out of the inspections budget, we have to be, I would be cautious about doing that,
Could you do that? Obviously not now, but come budget time, just let us know roughly how much what you said costs, whether it be solar arrays or split heat pumps.
I can do that, absolutely.
Maybe I'm going in the wrong direction, Counselor, but perhaps the fact that Shanti's here and we have a plan moving forward, now that we're caught up, maybe we're getting at the root of your, or toward the root of your issue, which is incentivizing people to do the right thing, and not have the excuse of, well, they're backed up and they take too long. I don't know. I think the strategy that Shanti's already employed in the first 3 months that he's been here to get caught up and to be proactive should hopefully help and motivate people to do the right thing, because there is now a decent process in place.
So maybe if that was the question, right, was how do we encourage the residents, contractors, developers to work with inspection department and be proactive in obtaining and applying for these permits. I feel like we have gone, we've made tremendous strides in the last several months towards that end. So, I mean, I hear it every day. And so the $100 permit fee that would be in place perhaps for a solar array is really, I feel, fairly insignificant with maybe a $20,000 system, but on our end, it's very significant because it does allow our budget projections to hold true with what we need in order to keep this department running, so.
That's fair.
Yeah. Okay. But I will put together those numbers for you.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity.
Okay.
All right, a motion to accept his, the original change?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shanti.
Thank you for catching up the backlog.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Terrific turnaround.
Yeah, okay.
Recreation Department,
Good afternoon.
page 40.
Welcome, Todd.
So the general purpose of the Recreation Department fee changes are that most fees have not been adjusted for multiple years, and we are just trying to bring ourselves in line with industry standards while still continuing to offer substantial savings for our residents, taking into account increased utilities and things like that. So as you'll see, Spinnaker Point is just a slight increase to membership fees for the year. And then the indoor pool is a special revenue fund that the city will be taking back over from the nonprofit SIP. And so we do need increased revenue to continue that, to keep the pool successful and operational. There's been no changes at the pool in 11 years. And so those numbers reflect a 6% increase across the board for all memberships. We also increased the per hour pool rental fee to match local area pools because we were substantially lower than other local pools. And then finally, the boat launch is just a small increase for non-resident season pass holders.
Any questions?
Again, I have a general question, not specific to those. And the basis for this question is working at the shipyard. I know there's military families there, and there's no pool there. And it dawned on me, would it be possible to waive fees for military and military dependents who want to go use the pool versus charging them the $2 as non-residents?
For the outdoor pool?
Yes.
I mean, it could be something that we can look into, absolutely. I'd be a little concerned with the amount. I guess I'd have to learn more about how many people that we would think would actually utilize that. But I think it's something that could definitely be.
Yeah, if you could look into that, that'd
Sure,
be great.
absolutely.
All right, a motion to accept recreation changes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next is Public Works, page 35, 36, 37.
We have a number of changes. This year, the first one is the Memorial Bridge lighting request, bringing it up from $50 to $75. The initial fee was set when we had really not much experience operating the facility and the operation of the lighting, and it does take some time to manage the requests. 3 different people touch those requests before they are actually able to implement, and staff has to actually make sure the switches are flipped to have it work. Yes, it's remote oftentimes, but it's still time it takes. So we've proposed to adjust that from $50 to $75 for this year. The next item is related to excavation permits, and it's not the fee for excavation itself. It's a deposit which we want to use as incentive for the people doing the excavations to follow up in a prompt manner to address the excavations they've completed. And the intent is to refund the deposit when they successfully complete the excavation restoration. And it's proposed to be at $500 to do that. We've found that contractors don't often reply to in a timely manner, and we feel like having a little hold on it will give us the ability to hold it, and if they don't do it, we can go ahead and use that money and do the restoration in lieu of that. Flagging permits are something that we haven't adjusted since 2014. We're proposing to bring the traditional flagging permit, which is a 5-day or a 5-day turnaround, from $25 to $50, and the expedited permit from $50 to $75. The permits, flagging permits, require a significant amount of staff time to review the detouring and the various things associated with traffic patterns and safety. So we feel that this reflects the additional costs that we're incurring now. The next item is a new fee item, crack sealing. The DPW recently purchased a crack sealing machine. Crack sealing is where you break the pavement through excavation and it leaves a seam there, which allows water to get in. And this time of year, especially, the freeze-thaw cycle is destructive to the roadway. Crack sealing allows us to tighten up the system so they get less water getting underneath the pavement and popping it out. We would not be using this unless somebody does not have the ability to do it themselves, and we would come in and to do it. The intent isn't to go out and start a crack sealing business. It's more just to address the vagaries of occasional person not following through. They don't do their work, and then we can recoup the monies associated with it. The last item is recycling bins. In the past, we had grants to offset the costs associated with recycling bins. Those grant monies have not, they've dried up a little bit. They've dried up. And what we found is that because the bins have been free, people use them for various things other than recycling. they come to the DPW and grab them, and they don't have a lot of feeling of responsibility associated with them. So we find them, you know, people use them for moving, they use them for storage, they use them for a bunch of different things. So the idea is that, in this case, there's a little bit of ownership and responsibility, that there's some value to these bins, and that the city is currently subsidizing them. So this is just to help offset that cost.
What was that cost?
$10.
And
Any questions?
I guess it's more a CIP question, but are we not doing the totes for the recycling? That was discussed years ago and may have gone to the wayside.
Yeah, the challenge with the totes is, the hope was to be able to apply them uniformly across the city. And because of the challenge, toters work well for areas that have the space to store them.
Okay.
So there's a lot of apartment dwellers that don't have that type of thing. So it was felt that that and the areas, in certain areas of streets weren't large enough to be able to handle them. And it was really directed towards automated, making it automated, so our staff were less exposed. Yeah, and they were less exposed in terms of the operations. And we had pursued that, but we've unfortunately not been able to execute that situation, so we do not have a toter.
I was a little unclear on crack sealing. So does this involve the city repairing private driveways for a cost?
We would not touch private driveways.
I didn't think
That's
so,
not the
yeah.
intent.
Yeah, this would be,
This is purely, road work.
okay. So somebody would call and say, there's damage that we need to fix on our road. And then this fee would kick in.
Yeah, if they created the damage. They
Got
would.
it, okay. That's what I
But
wasn't
not
understanding.
a resident that said, hey, I want to do that, and somebody said, okay, $300 will people want to fix your road.
It's an interesting new
That would-
line.
that would really help
New
with the
service
budget.
line.
Oh, you want your trash picked up? Send me some money.
Yeah, no, I think there's some,
The intent was really just.
little
for-
towns in New Hampshire do that. We don't do that.
No, this is not private. This is purely things that somebody caused damage and that would be repaired, and they would pay for that repair.
That helps me understand.
Okay, you had a
I've-
couple of Public Works questions. or-
But do you want to take a vote on the changes first, like we've done the other
Sure,
groups?
a motion to accept
The changes.
the changes.
So moved.
Second?
All right, and then your additional question.
So for the CFC removal, I'm wondering, and I don't know if you could actually know this information, but if having a fee discourages people to drop off their air conditioners or fridges versus if it was free, or dare I say, if we actually paid people $20 to drop it off. The reason why I'm throwing that out there is I mentioned methane from food waste. By far the worst gases out there are CFCs, as far as greenhouse gases go. So if there's a way to get people to bring more old equipment there, fridges, air conditioners, I think it'd be better. I just don't know how much you're getting
I don't-
to begin with.
I think the general public understands that there's a cost associated with disposing of these products.
Okay.
Roberta and Jen could speak to the numbers probably, but we've seen a significant increase in special waste disposal. So this is really something that, I'd be hesitant to waive some of those fees. We established adjusted fees last year and added some fees relative to bulky waste disposal last year. And that was really just a reflection of
The
people
times.
are, need to be doing this. And illegal disposal happens, but it's pretty rare. And, we found for the most part, people they understand this disposal cost.
Do you see many air conditioners just being thrown out during,
DPW?
not necessarily at the DPW, but if people leave it on the side of the curb at the end of the summer, hoping that the trucks will just pick it up and,
Yeah, usually if it's associated with a property, it gets put back to the property and the property owner's contacted.
Okay.
And that, we usually do an effort to track down who's associated with that. If it's thrown out in the woods, that's a different thing. So,
It's a lot of effort.
yeah,
Thank you.
yep.
I'm good.
While we have Director Rice here, the past 2 years, we've talked about stormwater at the fee committee. And this may be a follow-up for when we get to the budget. But as I recall, we spend about $550,000 of operating expense on stormwater, and then there's capital expense as well. And all that really is borne by property tax at this point.
50% is property tax, the other 50 is.
From the
is
sewer fund.
Sewer fund, yep.
Correct.
But it's, it's one wallet for the most part, so.
Right. Have we ever looked at where the largest sources of stormwater runoff are? And have we ever tried to say, if Walmart's got a 60 or 80 car parking lot and a flat roof, they're driving a larger share of that $550,000 cost than a homeowner and his driveway.
Yeah. So Brian is our point person for stormwater within the department, and he and other staff have been very involved in looking at just this question that you're asking about, and I don't know if you want to add anything to.
Sure, Counselor, this came up in, the council orientation, and we've been exploring, we're in the fourth year of the 5-year permit cycle for MS4 permitting. We also have our, the Great Bay Municipal Permit, which part of that says, actually, it directs us to look into stormwater funding, because the next realm of trying to reduce nitrogen in the bay and in water quality is actually to address stormwater. We're doing it at our wastewater plants with some really good success there. So what we've done, we did a stormwater master plan last year, and it assessed what some of the future costs would be. And we hope to sometime this year, through the city manager, bring forward basically a work session with council where we talk about a stormwater utility or special revenue fund or enterprise fund, and actually work on assessing those costs. So we had a master plan update last year that looked at it, and in general, it would shift the fees to a direct fee. So it would be a fee through this committee when it was finally established. And then it would go away from being funded 50-50 by taxes and sewer fees, and just be a direct charge. So like you say, the Walmarts would have a larger fee because they have more area, and it would really be based on that. So this has been done, throughout the country. It's fairly common, actually. And there are some communities in New England that are starting to do it. South Portland has, Burlington, Vermont. So it's fairly straightforward in that respect. Everybody is assessed, how large a property. If it's just a single-family home, it's a flat rate monthly fee. The bigger properties are prorated. What gets complicated are places that might come back with some credits. So they actually are doing some treatment on site, and then might be assessed some credits, because that's stormwater that's being treated actually on site. So we do hope to bring that forward sometime this year, given time constraints and stuff, and then pitch it as actually a separate entity here in the coming years. Dover, you may have seen a little article about Dover and that catchphrase, the rain tax. They want to call it rain tax. It's not a tax, it's a fee, but it sounds like just another way to charge for something that might not be charged before. And this actually is really just to proportionally charge people and the properties for the actual service, which what we're doing. So that's a long answer, but
that's a good
it
answer.
is a complicated thing, and once we dive into it, again, on the surface seems pretty simple. It's like, okay, prorated cost, but then when you get into credits, it also would apply to perhaps some places that aren't being paid, you know, if they don't have a sewer bill now, suddenly they'll get that stormwater bill. And also, it would include everybody, since it's a fee like utility, it would, you know, nonprofits, and that, it would apply to anybody's land, per se.
Yeah, well, obviously it would benefit the city because it would incentivize large properties to do the treatment on site. And it's an equity issue for me, you know. If we base it on square footage, it seems more equitable than how we're funding it now. In fact, you know, would it be possible, maybe we could model it, that there would be some goodness in not having to raise sewer fees as much or something like that if you had income from the stormwater utility.
There would be some offsets there, I believe, but, you know, we need to go through the full exercise of.
Need to model it.
Of all the costs, but we do anticipate doing that this year, so I think perhaps, I wouldn't make a promise, but, you know, this time next year, we might be putting something like that forward to the committee.
Coming to Channel 22 soon. Thank you.
All right, if you don't mind, Councilor Denton had some questions for other departments that weren't on the agenda, and they're real quick. We thought we'd just pop them in real quick, starting with the city clerk.
Sure, let me scroll back up to that one.
This had to do with the fee for restaurant tables and restaurant chairs.
Oh, thank you. So last year, the fees were waived for the tables and chairs on the sidewalks, and I saw they weren't being waived this year. And I just wanted to get, well, I guess, both your thoughts and Councilor Tabor's thoughts on possibly waiving them again. And what that would cost as far as...
So the total amount of revenue that we receive for that is $3,300 for the tables and $1,060 for the chairs, for a total of $4,360. One thing I will note to you is that we did send out renewal letters just last week. But if you want us to send a follow-up letter that they're being waived, we can do that, if that's the decision that the council chooses to go forward with.
How much do you think we spent on sending those letters? I know it's a silly question. I guess how many people do you think we sent it to?
I can tell you that.
Kelly, while you're looking, these are for restaurant use without alcohol, correct?
Yes.
Right.
13.
13, all right.
So not a significant number.
Wouldn't it be that much money to spend on postage if we wanted to?
Right.
Rescind that. Yeah, I'm fine. Rescind, I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, last year I was the one who made the motion to waive fees for restaurants due to COVID. But I think we're past that. I hope we're past that. And, you know, I think there has to be some enforcement mechanism for these sidewalk obstructions, which is, to me, what the fee operates to do.
That's fair, and I believe they're only, what, $10 for a table and $2 for a chair, something like that?
$75 for a table and $10 for a chair.
Got one right. But, yeah, I'm fine keeping them.
Keeping them.
Yeah,
Okay.
it shouldn't be burdensome.
All right, thank you.
Thank you
Kelly.
very much.
All right, then the planning department.
Beverly, come on up.
Beverly, present.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
So this is really to address the question you had, Councilor Denton. What's the max allowed by law that we can increase the wetland conditional use permit to for each of the three categories?
So consistent with what our city attorney said, that fees can be utilized for cost recovery for providing the services. I understand that our total fee collection on a yearly basis does not essentially exceed the value of the service that we're providing. I would say that for my staff, working on quantifying this, that we probably spend 85 to 90% of our time supporting applications and the review of applications, and we are within an area where we could still improve the fees or increase the fees. I did not propose any fee increases this year. The deadline came very quickly within a couple weeks of me arriving here, and I wasn't sure that I would have a good basis for understanding what the fee increases would look like. So I did not propose any additional fees. I did take a look at wetland CUPs for Keene, Concord, and Dover. I can give you a summary of those, but they're not inconsistent with our general fee schedule for that same type of permit. But as you noticed, I'm sure, in our overall fee structure that there's been quite a few fees that have not been updated for several years. I would have liked to have taken the time to do a little benchmark study and look at some of the neighboring communities. I've also seen it done basically tracking the consumer price index for urban wage earners and then taking a look at that year over year to identify an increase for fees. I am not entirely familiar with that process, but that has been a way to adjust fees on an annual basis, but I did not propose anything of that nature this year.
Thank you for coming in that explanation. Mm-hmm. So since they're in line with neighboring communities, at least the ones you looked at, there wouldn't be much basis to increase it on just off that.
No, I mean, in summary, I think Concord has a $250 base fee. Anything that is less than 100 square feet is an additional $50, and then more than 100 square feet up to 1,000 square feet is additional $150, and then less than 100 square feet is $50. Dover has a $200 flat fee, and Keene has a $100 base fee. That's an addition. That's less the cost for butters and publishing. And then I believe, so those are the three communities they looked at. It's not terribly out of line with what we're proposing. But again, the fees, we are not, at a point where we could say that they unreasonably are being assessed in a way that does not contemplate cost recovery. The jurisdiction I came from did 100% cost recovery, which required a real study of the hours put to and the wage associated with each of the people involved in review. It does get quite high, recognizing that state law is consistent here with where I came from, and it is in most states that fees need to be reasonably related to the service provided. We are well, I think, within that range, so there could be an increase proposed. I am concerned about the fees that haven't been updated since, I think, 2015. Maybe those fees could be adjusted as well. But generally, I did not propose any. But I think that you are within your authority to slightly raise them if you choose to. But they are not out of line with what those communities I mentioned are charging. I would add to that our sites are complex. Our projects are getting complex. Redevelopment is, I don't know how much greenfield development is being proposed in some of these jurisdictions, but we have increasingly complex projects and in challenging and constrained sites. And so I would say that the level of complexity of the projects in Portsmouth may not be equivalent to those jurisdictions, as most of the work we're doing is in a highly constrained urban environment along, impacted shore areas. So.
Now, if you have any appetite for increasing the 3 fees or leave it where they are until they all come back next year.
I would assume that the greater than 1,000 square feet category is where there's more work involved for your staff. Would that be fair to assume?
I would say that is likely to be true. That would be, I think, a fair statement.
Can I ask you a question of Councilor Denton? Is that noise much louder over on the base than it is here?
It's incredibly loud. It's louder here when it's raining out because sound travels more in.
Okay, I always wanted to know, and now I can ask.
It's 3 o'clock and most people are leaving, and hopefully we're not keeping people here past there.
No. Sorry to interrupt.
I was, Beverly, would $1,250 or $1,300 on the larger wetlands CUPs make sense?
I think that you would still be within a reasonable sort of amount with that price, with that
Is
fee.
there any way to do this per square foot? I know we shouldn't do it on the fly per square foot, but
You know, there are some jurisdictions that do that, but they mostly provide ranges up to this many square foot. So it could be that over 1,000 square feet, but I don't know that we see many of those. So I would just I would need to do a little more research to get a sense of what are, and really just check in with staff about what projects that they would say really represent, it really has to do with the type of development, where it's located, and what is currently on the site. Sometimes there is some restoration that's involved that requires a different level of review because they're, bringing certain areas back. So I can't say with any certainty, but I think that the larger the site, I think it's reasonable to say is probably a more complex question.
thank you.
Thanks,
Move
Beverly.
that we raise the fee for 1,000 square feet and greater to 1,300.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, next we had a question from Councilor Denton to the Health Department.
Welcome, Kim.
Thank you for staying for this.
Sure.
And it's just,
Do you want to read it?
This is a question related to the supermarket fee.
yeah, I know it's an odd question, and looking at what was listed, my guess it was all for prepared foods by hand. It was not.
No, our fees are based on inspection times and facilities.
So again, this goes back to the conversation about the CFCs, where actually supermarkets, they have lots of leaking CFCs in the floors. I'm not saying any of ours do, but just that's how the floors stay cool, is there's miles and miles of piping below there to keep them that way. So there's an effort nationally to try to get people to change the flooring and the piping in it in supermarkets. And along with the EVs and everything else, the thought was, well, if you can incentivize good behavior, but since it's not being what's inspected, I don't think we could actually increase it if they don't.
You're talking about chlorofluorocarbons?
Yes.
Well, that's a little bit out of our realm.
Yeah,
Once a
exactly.
building is built, we do the inspections on the, the operations and the food service equipment. But it's the building department that's really involved in the pre-inspections. My understanding, though, CFCs were out of production in the 90s and banned in several countries, including this one, in 2010. So I'm not real sure of those dates, but I would be surprised if we had antiquated enough systems to make it worth the effort that you're thinking to tackle that problem.
That's a fair response, and it sounds like it's way out of your jurisdiction. So, thank you.
Any more questions?
No.
Thanks, Kim.
All right, thank you, Kim.
Thank you for that.
Next would be the library.
Welcome, Christine.
Hi. So, I want to ask you the same question which I asked the Recreation Director regarding waiving fees for non-residents for library cards if it's military or dependent. Again, there's not a library at the shipyard, and our library is much better than the one that's being reconstructed in Kittery.
Okay. I can't answer exactly. My assumption would be that this would be something for our board and discussion with the city manager to go to the
That's fair.
council in terms of how we change our fees, which we haven't done in about 4 years. But I want to give you a little background on them. My goal in them, I haven't set the fees that are here now, but basically because New Hampshire is one of about 6 states that does not have any funding from the state or counties as other states do, all of our budget comes from the city of Portsmouth. So we do, anyone who owns property, anyone basically who's paying into the tax base in Portsmouth is entitled to library cards. The non-residents, in my mind, should be somewhere around the same amount that the local citizens are paying, because we're not trying to punish them. We're just trying to say, these people in Portsmouth have already paid into the tax base and therefore into our budgets. I know this has come up in the past because Maine does have state funding, or used to, I haven't checked it recently, used to have state funding to their libraries. And because it was determined by the Supreme Court, I understand where the shipyard is. This has come up in the past. And I think it's a fair question. I think some libraries, Dover gives a discount to veterans, not to active, as far as I recall, but to veterans and senior veterans. We give a discount to seniors. And it's certainly something that we could investigate and
That would
see
be great if you could.
how others are handling it. But I just wanted you to have that background, that we're actually charging more than the per capita of our budget, but our non-resident cards are per family. So I'd have to do the numbers would be different if you suggested, let's say, a family of 4 should pay 4 times the per capita, which is not what's happening. So we're somewhere in the middle there. Dover charges twice as much as we do. So with their discount for veterans, they're still paying more than we charge. And we've tried to maintain that to the level appropriate, understanding our costs for things like new services like downloadables and the things that have increased our cost over the years. But I'd be happy to bring it up with the trustees.
If you would, that would be great for both military dependents, and veterans.
Okay.
Do we know how many non-resident library cards there are?
The numbers, I didn't remember to get the numbers, but at the moment, this fiscal year, it's been $20,000 in revenue. And so I don't know how many of those.
Head count. How many?
Yeah, the head count, I'm going to tell you about 4,000.
Non-resident?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good library.
But we could divide that 20,000 by 100. So I can't give you a direct. I could find that for you as well, though.
I'm just impressed that
I just looked quickly to see, because if half of our non-residents happen to be veterans or active duty, and I have no idea because we don't ask that, it could be a loss of $10,000 or more, just so you're aware.
Right. Okay, that helps.
Thank you.
Put a order of magnitude on it. Thanks.
Indeed.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, back to the agenda, parking and transportation.
Actually, did we answer Councilor Denton's question about the exemption waiver for EV chargers and the utility excavation contractor permit for roads, sidewalks?
So
No, we didn't.
that wasn't directly answered. However, when the inspection department answered a similar question, I'd imagine the response would be very similar.
Yep.
Where it would take away. So
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
All right. Back to parking and transportation on page 48.
Welcome, Ben.
So, good afternoon. There was only one change this year recommended, and that's in the annual valet license on city property. So the division, mindful of a 10% reduction of its prime inventory during the tourist season, the driving this conversation is the appropriate valuation of all available parking products. Commercial valet and city-operated spaces was last adjusted in FY19. Presently, the license fee is $675 for a year, regardless of location, whether it's A zone or B zone. So, considering there are 356 days annually where on-street payments are enforced, the current fee of $675 is just $1.40 per day. But even considering highly reduced traffic in 2021, an A-zone space makes $12.40 per day in the last year, which is about 10 times that amount. So the division seeks to update this from $675 to $1,500 per operation, which would equate to $4.20 per space per day, which still equates to a 65.7% savings, if you will, for the lessee versus potential revenue generation, which is justified by the explanation you see here on 348, which is valet stations are only used when the restaurant's open, so it's not a full-time situation in many cases. That was the original justification for the lower rate, but for B zone, the request would actually be a reduction from the $675 fee levied. A single B zone space generated $4.05 per space each day in 2021. So for a valet operation located in B zone, the division would introduce an annual fee of $500 per operation using the revenue paradigm described before. A 500 fee would equate to $1.40 per day, which is a 65.4% similar reduction in value. The logic behind that being if it's the interest of fairness. You know, if we're trying to tie a valet license fee to revenue generation, then it warrants a discussion as to location, A or B zone. A zone obviously is high occupancy and greater demand, generating considerably more revenue. The pricing should consider that fact. Indeed, we have separate A and B zone rates for single-day valet usage. So in order to maintain consistent with the formula, if we're to use the value per day paradigm for Zone A, it's only fair that we do so for Zone B.
Any questions?
Seems
reasonable.
Yeah.
Before we vote, you did have an additional parking question.
So I guess two questions. One was, and I may have missed it because you're just talking about Zone A and Zone B, but the actual hourly parking fee, did I miss that? Was that in here?
So parking rates are actually city ordinance. They're not purview to the fee committee.
That's why
I'm happy to
voted on
discuss
it.
them, but I don't think this is the venue. And
that's-
Peter, you can correct me if I'm wrong there.
That's
No,
correct.
That's correct.
Thank you. That answers that.
Sure.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, motion to accept the parking changes?
So moved.
Second?
Water and sewer, page 56.
Welcome, Terry.
Hello?
How are you, Terry?
Go ahead.
So, okay, we move on, no fee updates until we get to page 56, as Andrew said. So each year, we update our rate model, and part of that, they look at assessing the fees, which in this instance, for fire services, are updated based on, these are the monthly charges based on size of the fire service. The next item is backflow testing, and it's been 8 years since we updated that. We actually have staff that go out and test backflow devices that are in properties throughout our water system. About 2,250 of those tests occur each year, so this is basically just increase of the cost of that service. On page 57, we do some jobbing work on occasion for properties that are getting new services, or if, so those costs are updated for 3 items, which are the hourly cost for backhoe, a dump truck, and a Vactor. And those costs are recommended there on page 57. And lastly, the big change for this year for water sewer, we had our rate consultant do a look at capacity user.
Brian, just a sec.
Oh.
These, we didn't mark them as changed, like with the highlight in the schedule that you were sent, so it's on page 58. It's the last fees on water and sewer, but we'll correct that before we get into the budget book. So it's the capacity improvement multiplier.
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah.
So anyway, our rate consultant looked at the capacity user charges. Essentially, these are buy-in charges for the capital infrastructure. And given, especially last year, just brought into service the Pierce Island facility, which all told is about $100 million worth of investment, not to mention many other investments in infrastructure, sewer separation, and pump station improvements, especially on the sewer side. So they were last updated FY19. So you'll see a big increase on the water side is about 10%, but it's the sewer that is recommending an increase. We'll start with the 1 inch. Again, these are prorated based on the service size, because the larger the service, the larger capacity we have to serve. And again, this was updated by the rate consultant when we did the rate study a number of years back, and it follows industry standards for doing that. So as you can see, just based on the 1-inch charge, which would be a residential, and these are for new services. So this is a building that, let's say, doesn't exist today. They're coming in, they're wanting a new service. So to buy into the system, that capacity charge is recommended at $39.85 on the sewer, and then prorated as you go up in size based on what type of building it is and how large their service is.
Those are some hefty increases.
They are. We've got some hefty hefty bills we're paying this year. Just our payment at the island is over $4 million a year to start paying back that loan.
Do you foresee this being a plateau, or would keep going up?
You revisit it. You can revisit it annually. Again, it hadn't been done in previous years because of, it's really the Pierce Island prompted this, because it really, such a big number that we're starting to pay back. So for all the years that, because we had revolving loan funding for this, while we were building and constructing the facility, we didn't have to pay back that debt yet, which was quite fortunate for, the money. Now we are paying it, that it's complete, so that goes on the books, and so users now that are a new user on the sewer system is, the sewer is going to this new facility. That's the best way to say it, and that's the buy-in component. Existing customers are paying for it. They paid for their initial buy into the system, and then they've been paying through the years as a ratepayer.
Would this, I can't remember, would this affect the Sagamore Creek low-pressure system? The rates?
I think this is going to be before council.
Yeah, I think that when we go back to the council to start talking about the cost apportionment, one of the items that'll be on there is any kind of buy-in fees, but it's generally waived for new construction like that. This part of the cost is generally waived for new connections.
Okay, because those folks are in for a lot already. Could this be phased over a number of years?
Could be phased, but again, these would be new customers, so I mean, I'm not, it's not a pro or an anti-development. It's literally, what is that cost?
Right.
So,
And balancing that is they are going to impact our system by requiring more capacity.
Right.
Using more of our available capacity.
Correct, and we do have, there are times where there's, Bob Sullivan, city attorney, explained this. There are occasions where certain customers have negotiated different fees based on maybe on-site improvements or off-site improvements they're doing. So on some bigger projects, this number may change. Some bigger projects, it might be higher for other reasons, depending on the type of sewer waste they are sending our way.
Is there any way to proactively tell people in advance these fees are going to go up? Or is that not possible because we don't know who's going to be building it in?
I mean, these are fees that go to new development.
Exactly, so it'd be tough.
So people who come in to do development, they're looking at fee structures, they're looking at, what it takes to build in a place, and they're aware. I mean, other communities have impact fees. In this case, it's a buy-in fee. So.
How does this compare to similar-sized cities in New Hampshire? How would this compare to, say, Dover or Nashua or Keene?
I know when we did it, we had an update through the rate model. It was comparable, but we can take a look at.
Okay, so we're not way out. We're not a big outlier.
No, no. We are a big investor. So, I mean, I don't know many communities in New Hampshire that have spent the dollars. In fact, Terry and I and Peter, we did an analysis. The city has invested over $200 million on system upgrades. That's a lot of money for
That's in the last 10 years, is that the figure you shared?
I
Something like that.
left it on my desk, but
It was 150 million over the last 10, and then 200 million over the last 20,
Okay.
approximately.
For a community of 22,000 people, that's a significant investment.
Yeah, the majority of it is over the last 10 years.
And if we didn't go with these increases, I would assume, or should we assume, that the sewer rate would have to go up to make up the difference? I mean, we have to pay that $4 million bond cost that starts hitting us every year.
So these fees are not, I think it's similar to, though Beverly's not here, but, you know, you don't necessarily count on these fees. I mean, we could have no development this year, so if you in your budget said, oh, you know, we expect this money's to pay for something and then have to have something offset, it does go more towards the bond payments and the expectation of that. We've been averaging around $100,000 a year of revenue off of this, so it would go up more, but it is, you know, it's the way we do the rate model, it helps offset because we have net position. So if we got 200,000 of fees above what we expected, that only helps us in the additional years. And our net position is really all designed to help buffer that impact of these big projects.
Smooth out
Smooth it out, yeah, best we can. We are unfortunately hit, like everybody else, with some increasing costs that come budget time we'll have to talk about, but.
Another thing to keep in mind here is you're looking at a pretty wide spread in terms of the size of the water service that they're getting. It's up to 10 inches. 10 inches is a gigantic pipe. So when we look at some of the larger units that were just built downtown, you know, normally those buildings are 4 to 6 inch size. So it's unusual to see someone with a 10-inch pipe paying $190,000 for a sewer service. You know, that's a user bigger than a roadway. You know,
Right.
A lot of our pipelines for, you know, standard roadways are 8-inch diameter. So someone coming in with a 10-inch diameter pipes, shifting around the way water flows in our system.
So just help me understand, if somebody builds a 20-unit building.
2-inch diameter. 2-inch.
2-inch diameter, is this, they then pay $12,752 per unit?
No, just for that service.
Just for
So
that
the
service.
single, so you could divide it by the 20, whatever, in apartments or units.
So it's really $600 per unit,
And if you-
hypothetically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see the history of the revenue brought in on the next page of the fee structure. So it was 100,000 back in fiscal 18. It actually dropped for water over time, went down to about 65,950 in fiscal 21. Sewer went the other direction, but just to give you an idea of what the history for those two particular items looks like from a revenue perspective.
Yeah. No, it all starts to make sense now when you look at it. It's new development, it's for the hookup, so it will be divided by a number of units.
Generally.
It's a one-time fee too, so.
Right.
It's really just upfront.
Any other questions? Motion to accept the water sewer changes.
So moved.
Second. Just in our stable and
in favor?
predictable budget world, we don't usually see jumps.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, perfect. All right. Next would be the Prescott Park license agreements. These are not on the fee schedule, but in a agreement, the 3 agreements, where it says, that the fee committee will annually review what the three nonprofits using Prescott Park pay for.
And I have to recuse, obviously, on Prescott Park Arts Festival. Board chair.
Guess we're down to one vote.
First time I'm looking at this.
Yeah, so the three organizations, the New Hampshire Arts Association, the Gundalo, and the PPAF, if you guys want to give a little history of how it's gone, go ahead.
Sure. So you can see from the document that Judy just handed out, this is the fourth year of the term of these license agreements. At the end of this fourth year, which will be May, early May, they can attempt to renegotiate another 5-year term. So we're looking forward to working with the tenants of the park. And as you can see from the red on the document, that because of COVID, a lot of the fees have been waived over the last couple of years due to hardship. What's very unusual about a license agreement is that a fee committee would recommend the increases annually. That's just a kind of an unusual provision for any of our license agreements. But interestingly, the task of setting the fee is the fee committee, but in all of these agreements, the city recognizes weather as a major component, and the city manager has the authority to reduce or adjust these fees. Now, I know when we did it for COVID, those votes came to council. Specifically, and we did get one request this year from the New Hampshire Art Association for a reduction in fees.
Did they specify the amount?
They didn't.
They didn't, and they didn't in years past. Last year, they got a third. Their fees were reduced by a third, and I
They were
think
actually, sorry to interrupt, they were reduced by
Two-thirds, excuse me,
two-thirds to
two-thirds.
one-third, right?
And the financials for the New Hampshire Art Association, and Judy, you can speak to this more, but they were running on a deficit out of their trust fund. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So for both last year and this year, the deficit was greater this year than last year. I don't have the circumstances as to why, but.
And just a note in the beginning narrative is that whatever the fee committee might recommend would need council approval.
So I'm just looking at the FY22 for year 4. They still paid something. Okay, so council reduced by 1/3.
One-third,
No,
that's
down
correct.
to
two-thirds.
1/3.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so the year 5 amount, that's what it would have been had.
No, year 5 is for fiscal year '23. So this is what you're
Correct.
trying to set for now.
Correct. So that number there, that's essentially an increase off of year 1, fiscal year 19.
Per the agreement, right?
It's actually in fiscal year, what was it? Fiscal year '21, the fee committee decided to add increases to it based off of the CPI from November to, the Boston-based CPI from November to November. So that's actually where that increase comes from, starting in fiscal year '21. If you're looking at New Hampshire Arts Association, you can see that there's a $32 increase. That is the CPI for fiscal year '21, which was 2.12%. So, and that was determined by the fee committee on that year, and we've kind of followed that ever since, that there would be an increase based off of that.
So it's year 4 to year 5 is a 5%, 5.31% increase, and that's what the number is based on,
That is correct.
right? So the year 5 is 5% more than year 4.
All right.
Before waiver.
Before waiver, yeah, this is what is being proposed, is what is in the year 5.
And are these fees like the fees that Attorney Sullivan explained, where they need to go towards?
These are in an agreement.
These are an agreement, okay, so
So this is contract.
Yes.
that makes more sense. So I would like to reduce them, but then they'll be reviewed by the council again, correct?
Correct.
Because if we reduce it to a third for the last year, prior year of COVID, I think it would make sense to at least reduce it to 2/3 this year, instead of just ramping up from a third to full.
So your request is to raise them to 2/3 of what the suggested is?
Correct.
Okay.
I'll make
All
that
those in
motion.
favor?
Aye.
I do them separately, so I would do
Oh, okay,
New
so-
Hampshire Art Association
Alright,
and then
so-
Gundalow, and for the
so New
Arts
Ham-
Festival, I would just have the record reflect that it's a suggestion and a recommendation without a vote.
That is fair. So for the New Hampshire Arts Association, I would like to reduce fee to 2/3
Of the
proposed amount.
All right.
And a motion?
For
Motion
so
to,
moved. You feel comfortable voting on the other two?
Yes. Yes, the Arts Association and the Gundalow.
Yep.
And the Arts Association has asked for relief?
Yes, they're the only of the three that, so far, that we've got a written request.
Okay. Because of COVID?
That's what they've stated.
Yes,
Okay, so they're coming into the year with a deficit?
yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm good with that.
And then I'll motion to do the same, to reduce the proposed fee by 2/3.
two
Two-thirds,
two-thirds.
thank you.
2/3. Any
For the
questions?
Gundalow.
For the Gundalow.
For the Gundalow.
For the Gundalow. Any questions?
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Now the third one, the CPAF.
Right, and this one I can't.
That's fair.
All right.
See if I get it correct this time. I'm going to motion to reduce the fee to 2/3 the proposed year 5 FY '23 amount.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And Counselor Denton, you had a question similar to the one for library
Yeah, so
and rec.
when it comes to the hourly fees for either launching boats and kayaks, or tying up to the pier, any guess what it would cost if we waive that for military dependents, or veterans?
I think that's a separate fee structure,
It is.
not under the terms of these license agreements.
Correct, so not,
Yeah.
Now we're back to the
same.
Yeah.
the fee committee.
Yeah.
Or the fee schedules.
If I may, the docks are a special loan that's structured through the trust, which I think it could be a little more challenging to provide those discounts.
Okay.
The boat launch is something that could be considered, but I believe would have to get back to you on the structure of how we're paying back the boat dock.
And
the
this
docks.
goes into the trust,
Right, these revenues do,
Correct.
Correct.
but not the boat launch doesn't go into the
The
trust.
boat launch does not, but the docking
The
piece
docks
goes.
do.
so if the boat launch would be the easiest one, I would definitely ask that be looked into.
That's a recreation one.
Yeah.
All right. So
And that would be for non-residents?
that would be for non-resident military dependents or veterans, so they show up with a kayak and say. And that would be for the daily, not for, I think there's both a daily and a pass. So just for the daily.
That's on page 43.
Thank you.
So what exactly do you want him to?
So this wouldn't be Peter, this would be more a question for recreation. If when they look into not charging military dependents or veterans for the outdoor pool, if the same could be done for the Pierce Island boat launch. And that would be not per season, that would simply be per launch. So if someone, there's,
So the budget book will reflect what is here, you know, besides the motions that we took. And the veterans report back, he's probably gonna have to report back. And if you guys wanna change something in June when you're voting on it after we report back, that's how it would happen.
that works.
All
Thank
right.
you. Should we motion to adopt this in whole or the individual?
We've kind of hit every change, so,
And others stand as proposed.
all right. But we do have one more thing on the agenda,
I'll just,
public comment. Any public comment?
Yes, sir, I do.
Have a seat, please. State your name and your address, please.
Thanks, Judy. Peter Huda, 280 South Street. In sitting here, I've made quite a couple notes, and I'd like to propose them to the members. In listening to the city attorney describe the fee structure for the composting, as a resident, I was kind of confused as to if we were actually talking about a fee here or a fine. And then my next question to that would be, are the costs associated with any of this, since you went the other way, being covered by who has to enforce this? Like, I don't know who mentioned that, how do you enforce that people are actually composting, that you gave them a discount already? And do we know that we're covering our cost on that one? The next thing I would like to ask is, I'd just like to make a statement from the inspection department on the roof permit, because I myself had to put a roof on 2 years ago, and I paid a fee. I paid a permit fee of $50, and there was no inspection. There was nothing included in that. I came over, I paid my fee, and that was it. So, FYI, I don't know how that fits in, but that's what was happening at that time. The next comment I would ask is to you, Peter, on the cost of the recycle bins of $10. I guess I would ask that the type of bins be upgraded or something if you're going to ask us to pay for them. This is one of my pet peeves, because I have repaired mine numerous times, and on South Street at 6:20 in the morning on Tuesday, you can hear the trucks coming up and the gentleman throwing the bins down. And if you're going to ask the taxpayers to pay for this, in addition to their taxes, I guess I would like better equipment so that they don't break and crack. And mine are ugly. They have 15,000 duct tapes on them because of that. So that would be my question there, since that has gone through. The last thing, I guess, in listening to especially Councilor Danton, I would remind you that for every fee you waive or for everything you cut, since this is the only place, there's only two places where we get revenue to pay for the services in the city. This is the other one. The other one is property taxes assessed to the residents and the commercial taxpayers. But for every fee you cut or take away or dismiss, it has to be made up somewhere. So it automatically goes to the property taxpayers. So I would ask you to please think about that, as I have no idea the amounts that that were discussed today that were decreased, and all of this, if passed by the council, would go on the property taxpayers. So that was those are my comments, and I don't know if you can answer any of my questions as far as the first parts, since this is public comment.
through the counselors, I've asked City Attorney Sullivan to come back to answer that question about fee versus fine.
Thank you.
Sure. Because I just want to make sure we have this correct. Bob, this is the question, you were in the room initially, the compost question.
Yes.
Because it's all in how you set it up. It's a fee for outdoor dining, but does it then become a fine? Does it trip that issue?
Not the way I've had some communication with Councilor Denton, and the way I look at it, it's simply an agreed upon amount. It's a contract between the city and the restaurant, saying if you compost it, well, the way it's developed even today, it says if you compost, you are fine, but if you don't compost, you're gonna have to pay this extra $200. And I don't think it's a fee or a fine, I think it's a contractual arrangement.
Thank you.
May I ask another? So, you didn't really go through the steps of how we get there. So you did mention that this needs to be in an ordinance.
It
So
is.
are we there?
Penalty has to be an ordinance. The way this one would get there, as I understand, after the discussion of today, is that probably tonight, somewhere along the way, Councilor Denton would get the authority from the rest of the council to make a motion in a place that's not on the agenda. The motion will be that the prior vote of the council with regard to outdoor dining service be supplemented by the requirement that all restaurants serving food on city property pay $200 additional composting amount, which would be waived if the restaurants actually complied with the composting ordinance.
Could we also consider the converse so that we don't run afoul of the vote that the council took previously? Could we structure it to say, and again, this gets back to enforcement, the fee in the case of a parking space is $1,500. If you do not compost, the city will charge you $200 additional for not composting. So as long as it's contractual, it doesn't matter?
That's what I was trying to say. The result will be the same. That's what I was trying to come to.
I'm just concerned about sticker shock or council changing that number and having it be a...
If I may?
Yes.
The thought I had originally was that instead of raising it to cover the cost, to add the additional cost, it would be reward the good behavior and deduct
Correct.
off the $1,500.
Right.
So that would be $1,300 for folks that do compost, and $1,500 because the $1,500's already been approved by council.
Yep.
And it wouldn't raise. I could see restaurants being upset that
Right.
there's been an increase in fee and it wasn't
Right.
was
Articulated.
publicly
Yep.
noticed and the
Yep.
whole thing. In this way, you're able to reward the folks that are doing the right thing, and it's a simple document. Document your contract with Mr. Fox, and then you qualify for that deduct.
And seeing as the council unanimously voted to send it here, do you think we'd have to go back to the council if we're going to be rewarding versus increasing?
Yeah, because you're changing it.
Okay, that's fair. And I could work that in tonight.
My last question on that would be, how is the public going to be made aware of this? Does this require a public hearing because of the change?
There's no requirement for a public hearing on this kind of a council vote. So probably the way the public would be informed of it is tomorrow, or anybody who applied for outdoor service on city property, just be told this is the status of the council.
We can include that information in the view permit message out to permittees, and we can certainly publicize it through the various channels that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, thank you for bringing all the staff here
Yes.
to answer my questions.
It's down to just a few.
Motion to, was it close the meeting? Adjourn the meeting, yes.
And before we adjourn, does it make sense for one or both of the counselors to put under their name for the March 21st agenda, the report of the fee committee, or what's the timing after this?
We just publish it into the budget, and
Okay.
that's the
Right.
report. And then when the budget presentation happens, you can speak to it when we have like a work session on the budget or not, But it will go up for a vote in early June, along with all the other budget resolutions, and these will all be listed as an attachment, and you all will vote on it. The dining ones, since the vote is happening now, those will not be in there as a change, they'll be as an active fee.
Okay.
If it's
Makes
passed.
sense.
The ones that were passed are active now, and if you make the amendment, it'll change the fee, and it'll be in the budget book as already active. All right?
Thank you. for the
Motion
effort
to
on that.
adjourn?
Yep. So moved.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.